What would you do if Batista and three of his friends broke into your cabin and told you, unless you kill a member of your family, the world and humanity as you know it are going to end? This is the question posed in M. Night Shyamalan's latest Knock at the Cabin. Not going past anything in the trailer, Knock at the Cabin fits right in with the movies that I think M. Night Shyamalan makes more often than not these days. A well-contained, high-concept, straight-ahead, well-told story that's going to annoy about half the people that watch it. Based on the novel The Cabin at the End of the World, Knock at the Cabin follows the story of Eric, Andrew, and their daughter Wen, who, while on vacation in a cabin, are met by four strangers who make the wild claim that they are there to stop the apocalypse. See, unless one family member makes the choice to sacrifice themselves, and they can't actually do the deed themselves, somebody else has to do it to them that are also in the family, the world is going to end. And they can't leave the cabin until they make the choice, obviously. Are the group for real? Can the family make the choice even if they are? M. Night Shyamalan does a great job of focusing on cinematography in this movie. Not only do we get super tight shots to make this story of 7 people in a cabin seem even smaller, even though it's about the end of the world, but we also use the camera to follow weapons as they're crashing down on maybe a sacrifice. I like that there's no wasted time. The story starts immediately when the movie begins, and once the story is over, the movie is done. No minutes are wasted. In fact, the only time we really leave the cabin is when we're going to flashbacks to kind of tell the backstory of this family that's in the cabin, but we're almost led to question if we even need the backstory. I'll be honest, my main takeaway from this movie is how incredible Batista is in it. Now, obviously, I'm a Batista fan, but this thing went to another level. This is the movie that I watched that really made me realize that Batista is doing this acting thing to be a great actor. He's taking on roles that challenge him, that push him outside of his comfort zone. I mean, his commitment to Leonard in this movie is so intense. I'm looking at him. I see all his tattoos. I look at his face. I've watched every match he's been in, and I don't see Batista. I see Leonard. It's remarkable. The politics of being a same-sex couple in the United States definitely plays a part in this movie, but never really pays off, which may be very intentional on the part of M. Night Shyamalan. I'm an M. Night Shyamalan fan. Speaking of Batista's commitment, I've always loved M. Night's commitment to telling stories. His storytelling in movies just feels like it comes from such a pure place. Everything in the movie is about that story. I also love that he creates these genre pieces that without him probably wouldn't exist as much as they do in the mainstream. When you think about it, The Sixth Sense was probably the best and worst thing that ever happened to M. Night Shyamalan. It was the best thing because it allowed him to create this career where he gets to be hands-on. He gets to have control. He gets to be the storyteller and tell the stories that he wants to do. He's consistently trusted to do that, which not a lot of directors are. But at the same time, audiences still hold him to the standard of the twist at the end of The Sixth Sense. And it's an unfair standard to hold anybody to. It's literally one of the best twists in the history of American cinema. So what about the twist in this movie? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reveal. I wouldn't go so far as to say there's a twist. I think there's a reveal. It worked for me, but I think for some it wasn't quite the impact that I've been dead this whole movie was. I don't remember if that was actually his line, but I think it was. I liked this movie. I liked the reveal. I felt the same way about this movie that I felt about The Visit, the movie about the grandparents that M. Night did on a pretty low budget. I thought it was a fun movie. Is the reveal earth-shattering? No, but does it answer the questions posed in this film? I say yes, and on that level, pays off big. So, what do I think the answers to the questions were? From this point on, let's talk about some spoilers in this movie. So, as it turns out, the way I interpreted it anyway, Batista and his friends not only were telling the truth, but they're literally the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Not only do the qualities that each of the people have match the four horsemen, but historically, if you look back, the four horsemen are represented by the same colors that Batista and his friends are wearing at the cabin, which is something that I didn't notice until they actually revealed, hey, these are the horsemen. They flirt with the idea, well, they do more than flirt with it, quite frankly. They suggest the idea that this is a group of people that were radicalized on the internet, that went on a message board and have found themselves in this echo chamber. And that's a story that we've heard over the last 5 years. That's something thematic. And it almost made me feel like this was going to be a commentary on that. But the difference here was that the crazy people on the internet were right. They also suggested that maybe this was a group of violent, bigoted terrorists that had come to torture this same-sex couple simply for the way that they lived their life, but they weren't that either. And I liked that they weren't that. It would have been really easy to make them that. Not only did they make it so the crazy people on the internet were actually telling the truth, but they kind of implied that maybe this has gone on for years and years and years. That every time there's one of these massive natural disasters, a different group of people is selected to represent the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and a different family is visited. And every time, the family has chosen the betterment of humanity over the life of their loved ones. I think that it's a conversation about not only how fragile humanity and life is, and that at any moment, a single choice could wipe all of us out, but it's also a commentary on how we judge people. You could have told a story in, well, we shouldn't judge people because they're bigoted people that are there to attack this same-sex couple, but instead, I think we're all sitting in the movie theater judging Batista and his friends as if they're these violent, kind of idiotic lunatics that found each other on the internet, when in reality, we were judging them too severely. They were sent to judge humanity, and we judged them. Maybe I'm thinking of it too deeply. Maybe I'm going too far with this, but that's kind of the reflection that I had. I was surprised that this movie was rated R. You know, I thought that a lot of the violence happened off screen, but for me, the tension worked, and obviously I was fully invested in the story the whole time. Ultimately, I think the reason why there's so much backstory is a red herring. They're trying to get us to see this story from the points of view of the people in the cabin, as opposed to Batista and the rest of the horsemen. Who would have thought Batista would have been a member of the Four Horsemen? M. Night effectively brought us into this world that he created, of course, based on a novel. And to me, he paid it off. At one point, I thought this might be a concussion dream. I said, you don't give that guy a concussion in the beginning of this movie without it meaning something. And maybe it still does. Maybe it justifies his vision. If you still want to say that this whole thing was a coincidence, you can still pass off Daddy's vision. I say Daddy because I don't remember which one it was. Daddy's vision as part of his concussion haze. But I think the concussion was a red herring too. I think that the payoff here was that these four were telling the truth. And that to me is the most unbelievable way to play this thing. That the four horsemen of the apocalypse actually showed up to the front door of these strangers and did so to save humanity. And then the question comes up. The story that we're seeing is portraying this family as being terrorized, as being victims. But in reality, Were they chosen because their purity would allow them to not only save humanity, but give their daughter a world to grow up in? The end of the world was coming regardless. Were they victims, or were they the chosen ones because ultimately they'd make the right choice? There's two things that M. Night Shyamalan loves putting in his movies. He loves giving himself a cameo, and he loves scenes in roadside diners. And we get both of them in this. I love that M. Night puts his stamp on the stuff that he does. I love that M. Night creates his own stories. I mean, he changed the book. The movie's based on a book, but M. Night changed the story because ultimately, once he's the one behind the camera, this is his story to tell. And I like it when a filmmaker does that. I'm sure that some of you watching did not like this movie. And if you didn't, feel free to let me know and let me know why I'm so wrong. Leave a comment, and I will see you next time for another review or episode of Sam Roberts Now, assuming, of course, that if some invaders come to your house, specifically 4 of them, and ask that you make a sacrifice, you don't get selfish on me and end the world.